The faith is the vertical one. It is the connection, it is the possibility of being in touch with our God. Love is the horizontal one. It is devoting ourselves to the life of the others. But endurance is almost one that, and that's the case in some other places written by Paul, it corresponds to hope, but it has the aspect of persistence. And for older men to have a sound, healthy, it's interesting that we have got that concept of something being fit, being healthy. Healthy faith, healthy love, and healthy endurance. It's in a long run that we're in this. And Paul says, make sure you remind, you teach, and you model, as we will be reading in a minute, those things to older men. Furthermore, the second group of people, and Paul says, likewise, meaning that there has to be a follow-up in a very similar manner. Likewise, you are to instruct the older women to be reverent. Again, to be dignified. The word behind this concept is a word of a holy living. Why is this an issue? Well, again, we have got quite a bit of instruction that was given to people during the time when this letter was written in a secular situation, where it was important in the later stages of your life to behave in a proper way so that the society would flourish. And so Paul says, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, meaning, practically, not to be, and there are two aspects, not to be slanderers, that is, not to talk about things that do not exist, but make for a good story, or secondly, addicted to much wine. It comes for the second time. But rather, they are to teach what is good. They are to pass on what is of healthy, good, and positive influence. Now, the interesting thing behind the word teach here is this. That teaching is not a classroom type of teaching. That kind of teaching is only caught. It's an education that has to go beyond a classroom education. Now, here a little digression. I have been doing some studies in the medieval guilds. I don't know if you know the term, but these were the professional groups of people who some have referred to them as sort of the unions of the Middle Ages, or even mafia who have controlled things. And at certain times, I'm sure there were those aspects to that too. But the big thing about a guild was this. A guild held a particular profession in very high regard. And so in order to be a good mason, or a good baker, or a good goldsmith, or any one of those, and they kept growing, you had to go through stages of formal education. You were an apprentice. And at a certain stage, you were allowed to work alongside with your master. And at a certain stage, you had to go through an exam. And that exam, to become a master yourself, was very interesting. On the one hand, it was a technical expertise. You had to be well trained to do your job. But there was another aspect. The master had to vouch for your character. And unless he or she was able to do that, you would not be promoted to be a master. We somehow have lost this aspect of character formation in our training. In the professional schools that most of us have visited, we know that there is a huge emphasis on expertise and being the best and the newest and the technology and all those things that are hugely important. And as somebody had said, I would rather go to Doctor Who will treat me well and maybe not be a great personality, rather than to someone who's nice and kind but who can't help me. Well, that's actually not an option for a Christian doctor. Because the gospel teaches us that the character is absolutely important to what we do. And this is why Paul has such a great emphasis on this whole issue of teaching, reminding, exhorting all groups. And in our Christian walk, I think one of the things that we sometimes forget is precisely that. We teach the doctrine, and we hope that the doctrine itself will produce the desired effects. It seems that Paul understood that the doctrine has to go alongside with modeling. And so what happens here in this situation is that Timothy is encouraged to do exactly that. And it's not only to those who are younger, interestingly enough, but he's to remind the older ones to hold on to what is good. Likewise, the older women. And verse 4 is very interesting. Then and only then. This is once people are trained themselves to do what is good, they can pass it on. It's an interesting thing about sharing. You can only share what you have. You cannot give what you do not have. And so the encouragement is to load ourselves up with things that promote godliness so that we can then pass it on to others. Now, we get into this verse 4, and I need to unpack a little bit the story here. And then these women, the older women, can train the younger women. Actually, the term that is used here is a very interesting one. It's a term that does not come, and I'm looking for my piece of paper, that is not a very easy one to translate, and so most of the translations struggle with that. Then they can train, has our NIV, train the younger women to love their husband and children and so on. The technical term that is used here, sophonizo, in the first century has had a peculiar meaning, and a first century Jewish historian, Philo, uses it several times. And the meaning of that word is to bring someone to their senses. Wake them up. Bring them in a restorative way to the place they have departed. Now that's very interesting, you would say. Why is there a problem with younger women? In his very seminal study on the Greco-Roman times, Dr. Bruce Winter, the book is called Roman Wives, Roman Women. Roman Wives, Roman Widows. He talks about the fact that the Cretan situation was, in fact, a peculiar one in the Roman world. The Cretan women have been very early on given privileges like never before and nowhere before. It was very easy for Cretan women to divorce their husbands and not only to get back their dowry and so have that, but keep the whole of the family property. This led to an isolation between men and women in the environment that they were living. And so culturally it has so led to a laxity of morals, of responsibilities, that Paul is addressing a specific issue here. And so when he talks to Titus, he says, bring the ideas that have been neglected by the younger generation into the focus. And the point is this: they are to love their husbands and love their children. The word is to be devoted to be dedicated to the family. The idea is this: it was a good thing in the eyes of many in those days to get married because it was the thing to do. But after that, you live your own life. You pursue your goals. You live the life of luxury. And you do not care about your family. And Paul says the older women must teach, must show by example to the younger ones that it is important. It is the very center of a Christian virtue to lead a family well. To be self-controlled. We have got again the same word. And it's interesting that this word self-controlled has got very strongly sexual purity in mind. Not just being able to withstand attacks from someone. And this connects with the next word also, to be pure. To be pure in mind and to be pure in the behavior. The next statement also is fairly strange for us. To be busy at home, as though Paul was saying, stay at home, do whatever you need to do. And many, in fact, have interpreted this as purely cultural. Well, Paul is, of course, speaking into a very different environment. And yes, he is, but the environment was not to take care of your household. And the idea behind this, and again, it's a little clumsily translated, the idea is to work hard at managing whatever has been given to you as a woman in the home. It's hard work, and many have fled that responsibility. To be kind is the next injunction. What does it mean to be kind? Again, in the context, it probably means to be hospitable, to bring people a desired care that they may have while traveling, while being thrown out of their homes. And by the way, here's just a little short note. When we talk of hospitality today, very often, especially in the Western world, we think of having someone over for dinner or for coffee. Hospitality in the first century meant something totally different. Hospitality meant you shared whatever you had with those who were persecuted, those who had to escape from their homes, who were squeezed out of whatever they had, and to welcome them for as long as they needed to stay with you. That's a serious charge to us, to be hospitable. And then the last one, and perhaps the most difficult one, and to be subject to their husbands. Wow, what does this mean? Is he going to start talking again about those controversial issues? And I'm not. But I'm going to say something interesting to me, I think, here is, and to be subject to their own husbands as the actual text goes. And I would venture, following Dr. Winter's findings, to say that the young women of the day were so emancipated that their physical love, their sexuality, has been experienced outside of their marriage. And Paul is encouraging them to live a pure life within a marriage, to be connected to your husband, to your own husband, that is, not to somebody else's husband. Now, you will say, wow, this is a little far-fetched. I would encourage you to do some of that study yourself. And the reason for that argumentation on Paul's side is so that no one will malign the word of God. It is not just that it's good for you, but it has got an effect on how people perceive us as believers. What does the word mean? and who God is. It's very interesting that in the Old Testament, very often, God is concerned about Israel blaspheming his name by